On a seemingly harmless summer afternoon, a child fell into the swift river with his mother's helpless gaze following. No one knew how to swim. No one had time to react. But then a strange dog appeared from nowhere, darting through the grass, leaping straight into the cold water. And with an unexpected strength, it pulled the boy back to the shore alive. They called it a miracle. Let's begin exploring the story. It was a summer afternoon, like any other. The sun was hot, but not unbearable. The wind blew gently, and the river flowed quietly, as familiar as an old friend, always present, always silent. And sometimes that's why it was taken for granted. The village children gathered by the riverbank. They laughed, skipped stones, splashed water, and called each other by familiar names. No one remembered where they came from. Then, amidst all that carefree joy, there was a small moment, tiny enough to change the course of the world. A boy not too big or small, just the right age to think he knew how to swim, slipped on the river's edge. No one noticed right away. All the sounds were still ringing in the sun. By the time they realized, the boy was half submerged, flailing his arms out of rhythm, no longer calm enough to remember how to stay afloat. The mother, standing a few meters away, couldn't swim. She screamed. Her voice drowned in gasps for air, but her feet were stuck to the ground, as if fear itself was holding her back. No one else was close enough. No one jumped in until a shadow appeared from the other side of the grass, a place no one had initially paid attention to. No bark, no call, just a splash of water, short, decisive, heavy, as if the earth was pressing down on that leap. A dog, large, wet, with dark brown fur mixed with black, no collar, no leash. Muscles showed through the water, each stroke powerful and precise as if programmed. No one knew who the dog was. No one had ever seen it in the village, but at that moment no one asked questions, they just watched. The dog swam out into the middle of the river, bit into the boy's shirt, and tilted its body to keep the boy's head above water. The current began to grow stronger. No sound, no command, just instinct or something more profound than instinct, doing what humans were supposed to do. It dragged the boy toward the shore. Not straight, not fast, but steady. Just as the boy's head almost fell, the dog's paws touched the sand. One strong tug, and the boy came up, gasping for air, hands reaching out as if clinging to life. The mother ran over, holding her son collapsing. People rushed over, the screams turned into cries, but the dog was no longer there. When people looked around, it had gone or disappeared with the current. No one could quite remember exactly when it left. There were just a few wet paw prints marked on the grass, stretching for a while, then stopping halfway. After that jump, the dog vanished. No one knew where it had run off to. No one retained a clear image of it, except for the shaky video from a teenager holding a camera. But when the water calmed and the boy was tightly embraced in his mother's arms, people realized the dog was no longer in sight. It didn't wait for a thank you, it didn't look back, it didn't wait to hear its name called. It was a moment of heroism, and then it faded into the evening sky, as if it had never existed. A few days later, the news spread, online articles reported it. The video was shared hundreds of thousands of times. Unnamed dog saves boy from drowning. Sensational headlines alongside clips of dancing pets or cats wearing sunglasses. But in a small corner of the town, an old man whispered, "I've seen that dog." He was a retired veterinarian living alone near the gas station at the end of the dirt road. For months every morning, he had been leaving scraps of food behind the barn for a large stray dog that never dared come close, an intelligent dog with eyes that didn't belong to one that had lived in the wild. He confirmed from a still cut from the video. It's him. Old records were reopened. Phone calls were made to those who had worn military uniforms, and the name thought to have been erased slowly emerged in the yellowing data stream. KN RX-14. Name, Rex Unit Rapid Response Team. Northern Mountain Region. Status, mandatory discharge. No longer fit for duty. The reason was briefly noted: severe behavioral disorder after traumatic psychological injury. They didn't speak much about the accident anymore. The unit was disbanded. Files were sealed. But among the few who remembered, everyone had heard of Carter, a young officer who had always stood by Rex's side for 3 years of duty. The cave collapse while searching for 3 missing hikers had claimed his life, and Rex, according to reports, had pulled 2 people out. But the last time he went back, he couldn't save his owner. Rex survived but was never whole again. Afterward, it no longer responded to commands. It didn't raise its head, it refused training, it sat by the door of the room where Carter used to sleep every night, until it was forced to leave the unit silently with no ceremony, no pat on the head from its old commander. A dog that once could distinguish 3 types of chemicals under the snow was now labeled as unstable and unfit for duty. It was placed in a retirement center for retired service dogs, but after a severe storm, the back gate was blown open. Rex disappeared from the system. The last time anyone saw him was at the forest's southern edge. After that, no one reported anything, and for the military, the official record was quietly closed with one line: missing, may have died. Hide. But Rex didn't die. He chose a different way of existing, no longer following commands, no longer wearing armor, no longer with anyone by his side, just silently trailing humans from a distance along fields, quietly behind playgrounds, and hiding in the shadows of trees whenever he heard children laughing as if a part of him was still waiting for something. To do the right thing one more time. And then it happened. Not with the sound of a mission whistle, not amid the chaos of training, but one quiet afternoon by the riverside, when a boy was about to be swept away by the rushing water, everyone else was frozen in shock. Rex lunged forward. No orders, no name is being called. Because deep in the memory of a soldier, even a 4-legged one, there was still a reflex trained to help those in need. People often tell stories of heroics with neat endings, a round of applause, a wreath, or a tight hug of thanks. But sometimes heroes don't stay to receive anything. They simply do their part, then quietly disappear, as if their presence was only meant to exist in a moment of life and death, and afterward fade into nothing. For Rex, it was a quiet afternoon. No sirens, no flashing red lights, no cameras waiting, only a river and a small life slipping away. The boy was pulled up alive. The mother dropped to her knees by the grassy bank, hugging her soaking, muddy child, panic and dirt clinging to her pale skin. The crowd began to gather. The shouts turned into frantic applause, then into chaotic calls. Phones were drawn, cameras flashing, everyone wanting to capture the miracle that just occurred. But the protagonist had vanished among all the lenses aimed at the riverbank. No one noticed when Rex left. No one saw him climb up from the slippery mud. There was no sound, no shaking of waterlogged fur, only a water trail leads into the tall grass by the riverbank, then stops. The grass wasn't disturbed. The ground had no deep paw prints, as if no creature had ever passed. People searched. First a few children, then the adults, finally the entire village. They brought food leashes, drone cameras. Every method used for lost dogs was employed. But this time no one was lost. Only a dog who had chosen to retreat. On the second day, they searched the pine forest to the west, where a narrow dirt road led to the old village cemetery. Teenagers swore they saw a large, dark figure running across the hill at dawn, but no one could confirm it. On the third day, they found the old collar hanging on a dry tree branch about 100 meters from the riverbank. A metal piece with the stamped markings, K9RX14, next to scratch marks on the tree. as though there had been a moment of hesitation before it moved on. No one knew if it was left intentionally or if it was simply a final goodbye. Time softened all the noise. The river continued to flow, and children still gathered. The mother still took her child to school every day, occasionally glancing towards the reeds where the ground still bore an imprint, but said nothing. Only one thing remained unchanged: the feeling that someone had once been here, done what no one else dared, and had left in silence, as if that mission had never been about glory. No one saw Rex again. Not alive, not dead, no message. Only a blurry clip circulating on the internet. There was a single moment in the trembling frame, when a dog's head emerged from the rushing water, eyes fixed on the bank, unwavering. People could pause at that image, zoom in, and feel something beyond the action, the absolute commitment requiring no validation. A few days after the incident, the video was shared with a simple headline: "Unnamed dog jumps into the river to save the boy." That's all. No sensationalism, no exaggeration. But perhaps it was precisely the simplicity that made viewers stop and linger longer. They looked at the decisive movement of that body, the paws cutting through the water, the teeth gripping the hem of the shirt, the eyes half panicked, half determined, and they understood this was not an ordinary stray dog. Somewhere amidst the clicks, the video reached a man who had long left the field, living in a small log cabin on the outskirts, where his memories were kept in a metal box covered by dust. His name was Reynolds, a former rescue officer who had worked in the K9 unit in the northern mountains, where he had trained dozens of dogs for search and rescue missions, and one of the most special dogs he had ever trained was K9 RX-14. Rex. At first, Reynolds thought he was mistaken. Time can deceive memory. But when he stopped at frame 174, he saw something that could not be faked. The slight tilt of the head only seen in Rex whenever it was about to leap into cold water like a self-reminder. He had once called it the waiting beat of instinct, and no other dog had ever repeated it. He contacted the person in charge of the old unit. No one knew Rex was still alive. No one thought it was possible. They assumed it had died, or if not, it had lost its professional instinct after the traumatic shock of Carter's death. And that was when the truth began to crack like spring ice. The files were sealed, but now they were being reopened, and as each old page was turned, they found something painful. Rex had never been adequately recognized. It wasn't given a medal. There was no news report recording its sacrifice during the cave-in. All that remained was a cold assessment. Does not meet behavior standards. Recommend discharge. But now the video proved the opposite. Rex, after 3 years of being forgotten, without a master, without a station, with no one to care for it, still retained the instinct to save lives. Not when commanded, but when life needed to be saved. People began to search. No longer just the villagers or the children. Rescue teams sent search parties. Volunteers from old units started to return to the area. Each brought a clue, a memory, a photo, a chewed-up toy that Rex had carried throughout training. The whole country now knew about the nameless dog. But the person who knew it best did not come to find Rex to honor it. Reynolds came for something else. An old debt, an apology that had never been spoken. On the 7th day after the incident, when people started to lose hope, an elementary school student ran back from the playground, pointing towards the old wooden bridge, where few ventured because the path was slippery and rotting. Beneath the bridge, near the reed-filled, flooded area, a dark brown mass wedged between two rocks. Eyes half-closed, body emaciated, but the chest still rose and fell. Weak, slow, but real, Rex was found. No barking, no rising, but when Reynolds crouched down and placed a hand on its shoulder, Rex opened its eyes and gently tilted its head. Exactly like in the memory. Exactly like the last time it was about to dive into the rushing water, there was no fanfare when Rex was found. Only the sound of old wooden floors creaking beneath the feet of those carrying the stretcher. The wheels rolled over the wet grass, heavy as though gliding through memory. An eerie silence enveloped the onlookers as they stared at a dog that no longer had the strength to stand, but still tried to keep itself in a position on the stretcher. As if afraid to soil the white sheet, Rex was taken to the old veterinary clinic in the village. They gently wiped the mud off his matted fur, administered IV fluids, and checked his heart rate. While the initial numbers were not promising, they treated him with the respect of a patient of honor. Reynolds sat there nearly all night saying nothing. He simply placed his aging hand on Rex's back, softly, steadily, almost as if afraid the silence would shatter if anyone spoke. At his age, one no longer expects to fix the mistakes of the past. One only hopes for a chance to touch it once more. On the second day, Rex tried to lift his head. On the third day, he ate a miniature porridge. On the fourth day, he stood up shaky, but on all fours. And that afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the distant pines, the village held a small ceremony. No red carpet, no large television cameras. But everyone who had stood by the river that day, the mother, the child, the quietly observing villagers, was present in the middle of the dirt courtyard. They set up a simple plaque. On it hung the old collar next to a large print from the video capturing the leap. A young rescue officer from the new unit read aloud the decision to award the honorary medal. But what was most memorable wasn't the certificate. It was when Reynolds knelt, fastening Carter's old silver medal, the teammate from years ago, onto the collar Rex was wearing. Not with a chain, but with a ribbon frayed at the edges over the years. No one clapped. No one cheered. They just stood there, in the slanted golden afternoon light, letting the space envelop that moment, acknowledging that sometimes justice doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be seen, called by the correct name, and kept in memory. From that day on, Rex was no longer the nameless dog. The mother of the child asked to adopt Rex. Not to repay him, but because she believed her son, after nearly losing his life, had changed. He was quieter, more reserved, and every time he sat by the window to study, he habitually ran his fingers along the back of the dog, sleeping at his feet, as if writing something with his fingertips. Rex never returned to his old unit. No one ever mentioned the hastily closed old file. No one needed to say the word sorry anymore, because everything that needed to be said had been understood through actions. He aged slowly under the small porch beside the growing footsteps. He no longer rushes into the fire, jumping over deep holes needing to prove his worth. Because now Rex had a name. He was called, he was remembered not as a legend, but as a quiet, unmoving part. In the heart of a family, time passed as it always does, without anyone's reminder, without waiting for anyone to prepare. And Rex, the dog, who once jumped past all doubt, who swam through every judgment, began to grow old. Not loudly, not with warning, just quietly, slowly, with eyes that sometimes seemed to look beyond the garden in front of the house. The little boy from years ago was now taller than the back of the chair. The house where Rex lived with his new family hadn't changed much. Just a few things had been moved, a few old footprints covered in dust. But the blanket folded by the window was still there as a ritual. And every afternoon, when the sun slanted in, one could still see the dog's silhouette in the light. Rex no longer chased the bicycle. He no longer stood up every time the bell rang, but his ears still twitched whenever the child sat down to study, like a reflex that had never disappeared. As if in his heart, the boy was still a life to protect. Even though the world had become much calmer, the mother would say that some nights She would wake up to find Rex standing by the window, not barking, not moving, just staring into the night as if listening to something that only those who have lost could hear. Perhaps it was the familiar footsteps from a place known only to those who have experienced loss. Rex lived 2 more springs after the day he was found. And then one morning in May, when the soft drizzle fell upon the grass, Rex lay down beneath the flowering peach tree by the fence, right where the boy had first played with him. No groan, no calls, just a slow breath fading into the earth. The family buried Rex beneath the tree's shade. There is no stone memorial, no engraved name, only a small wooden branch stuck into the ground, and at the foot of the tree, an old rusted collar wrapped in a faded ribbon, the small metal still faintly glimmering in the soft sunlight. And then they left it. No commemorative plaque, no repeated stories, just the occasional glance when walking by the backyard, and the habit, now instinct, of looking toward that place whenever rain is near. Years later, when the boy had become a man, left the village and started his own life, there was one time when he came back. Just for a brief afternoon, no one knew. No announcement, he stood beneath the old tree, bent down and placed a small stone on the earth. White, round, clean, just like the ones children used to pick up by the riverbank. Then he left. Without a word. Without leaving anything behind. But in that quiet evening light, if anyone looked closely, they would see a faint dog's paw print on the earth, as if the wind had just brushed it. Unclear, but not quite disappearing. As if something was still here. Not a body, just a promise.